Welcome to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the place where you can learn how to create a dental practice and a business life that you love. Listen in with Dr. David Moffet as he interviews successful entrepreneurs and successful business people and successful dentists as they share their business successes, their stories, and their breakthrough ideas. Sharing pearls of wisdom that you can take back to your practice and implement immediately so that you can have that great practice with more patients, higher profits, and less stress. This is the podcast where great dental practices meet with successful business processes. Thanks for tuning in to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the podcast where thought leaders, industry experts, and thriving practice owners reveal their very best tips, tools, and strategies that will help you to grow your dental practice faster. Now, here's your host, Dr. David Moffet.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. David Moffet. I'm in Burrowang in New South Wales, and today gives me great pleasure to be actually talking to somebody who is in the same state and the same time zone. Often I'm talking to people in the USA or in Canada or in Europe, but it's nice to be talking to Owen Morgan, who is up in Sydney. He's the CEO and Executive Director of a company called Bioanalytics, and it's an exciting project that Owen's at the helm of. I'll let Owen talk about it and what Bioanalytics is doing and what they're doing in the dental space and how they're revolutionising a part of healthcare. They've found a niche in this part of the healthcare market, and they're advancing there with a very exciting device for patients. Owen, welcome to the Ultimate Dental Podcast.
Well, thank you, David, and thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here.
Yeah, no, good to have you. And you and I have met through a friend of mine who I met down here. He was the station manager of a community radio station, and that's how I got to know John. And he was telling me about this device that he was personally excited about because it was something that he could wear for a condition that he had that often people in his situation couldn't wear because it's an intraoral appliance that helps people who may have sleep disorders and mild sleep apnea. But for people without top teeth or bottom teeth, it's very hard to get a device because they rely on sitting on teeth, but this one didn't. So pricked my ears up when he told me that he'd been working on this project, and then he introduced me to you a few years ago, and now we're seeing the results of all that work coming to very close fruition in the marketplace.
Yeah, that's right. And, it is surprising how many people wear dentures as they get older. And if we look at a marketplace like the US, it's a surprisingly large percentage of people over the age of 50 who wear dentures. So, yeah, this device is quite revolutionary from a number of perspectives. And as you mentioned, David, it's centered around the mild to moderate sleep apnea space, which is really quite a big population. In the Western world, that's 67 million people. And sleep apnea is a disease state where you stop breathing during your sleep for a period of time. And for those people who have sleep apnea, they're at risk of life-shortening disease states such as heart disease, stroke, diabetes, and dementia and hypertension. And the correlation between sleep apnea and those disease states is now well established. And it's something that I've been involved with for quite some time. So my original involvement in sleep apnea was that I was responsible for the global business unit for CPAP with ResMed, who is one of the global leaders in the production of CPAP machines. And that was a really interesting time. So I was responsible for the innovation and the product portfolio and all of our research, our team of around 200 engineers and research specialists. Part of my responsibilities was the global rollout of those product lines and where we would invest. And it was a terrific job. I had a lot of fun. It was, though, quite difficult in one sense because it became very apparent that not everyone could tolerate CPAP, nor could they tolerate a lot of the existing mandibular devices. And I was aware that perhaps 40% of people who were diagnosed would not be able to use their device within 12 months. And I thought to myself, gosh, there has to be another way. And that was the introduction to this journey, which has been, a reasonable amount of time. I'd be happy to share a bit more about that with you.
And it's an important part of dentistry. As a retired dentist now, treating people with sleep conditions that cause other conditions and knowing about that connection is a rare opportunity for dentists, and a lot of dentists don't take that up. And in fact, I remember when a friend of mine said, the future of dentistry is looking at sleep and treating sleep conditions. And I'm going, what the heck is he talking about? And then once I learned how life-changing it can be for your patients who are suffering from conditions that they don't even know that these conditions are connected to their sleep, is really quite exciting. I had two patients that spring to mind immediately. One patient who came in with his teeth so worn down that the gap between his two front teeth, there was only a millimetre of tooth, and then it was the gum. His teeth were worn down, and every time he went to a dentist, the dentist would call the staff in and they'd all laugh and say, look at this guy, look how worn his teeth are. And he came to me for a cosmetic improvement, and I opened up his jaw with a device. And he said to me, I can't believe how better I am sleeping. He said, I just thought I was cranky and irritable and couldn't sleep because I was getting old. And he wasn't that much, he was in his 60s. He wasn't that old at all. And so there was the first one. The second one was a lady who had these huge masseter muscles, a young girl, and she had huge masseter muscles and her teeth were worn in a certainly irregular fashion. I said, do you have trouble sleeping? She says, I don't even want to go to sleep, she said, because I wake up with the most dreadful migraine headaches. I wake up in tears with the pain. And so we gave her an appliance and opened her up, and immediately she slept better. The migraines went, and her friends accused her of having cosmetic surgery to her face because the masseters weren't working as hard as they were because of her sleep condition that we had fixed, that they literally just fell off her face. And she had instead of having a face like a pentagon, she had a face very triangular and much slimmer. So those are two memorable things that mandibular devices can do if only dentists will learn more about it. So I was excited with this because when John told me about its ability to treat people without teeth, that's a big chunk of the population that have sleep disorders that are going untreated or can't tolerate CPAP machines and fall off the wagon, don't they?
Well, that's right. It's at least 40%. And if you went and chatted to a sleep physician or someone in the dental community who specializes in sleep medicine, I think that, and the literature as well, would indicate that it's probably closer to 50%. So almost half of everyone who invests somewhere between $1,500 and $3,000 in a device to help them, whether it's CPAP or a traditional mandibular device, stops using it in the first 12 months. And often a patient will have both devices and they've stopped using both of them. One's in the left-hand drawer of the bedside cupboard and one's on the right. And, it doesn't take long at a dinner party, if you mention you work in this space, for these stories, just like the one you've shared, to come out. Everyone knows someone or has a partner who has sleep apnea, and they've either struggled with the treatment and stopped using it, or they haven't got diagnosed. So CPAP is a good therapy, and it works really well for people having one event a minute, one event every minute and a half. And so, we say there that their apnea rate, their AHI or RDI is around 60 events per hour, 50, 60 events per hour. 2/3 of the population actually have mild to moderate sleep apnea. So that's where it's happening once every 4 minutes, once every 3 minutes. And by that, I mean you stop breathing and your body recognizes that you're not breathing because your carbon dioxide levels go up in the bloodstream and your body's monitoring that. And as a result, you get a little shot of adrenaline. And your body's strategy is to get you to wriggle around. And a result of that is that the airway opens, but the unintentional result of that is that your sleep state doesn't deepen. And so you miss out on the important stages of sleep because while you're not becoming conscious, every 2 minutes, every 3 minutes, every 4 minutes, your body's giving you a shot of adrenaline and you're wriggling around to open your airway and you're not getting into those deeper stages of sleep. And that's really critical for your well-being. And the science around that is really robust. And when I first started in the industry, when we perhaps spoke to a cardiologist about the link with heart disease, it was an interesting conversation, which was something like, perhaps now if you see a cardiologist, one of the first things they may do is get you to do a sleep study. So the links are really well understood. And it's actually an interesting thing to mention that not only will it shorten your life, which is very regrettable, particularly given we have therapies now that can address that, including the Bioanalytics device, but it's also a huge burden on our economy. For the US, for example, the cost to the economy of sleep disorder breathing disease states like sleep apnea is over $150 billion per annum. And that's made up of lost productivity and the cost of accidents and premature death. It's all of those things rolled up together. In a country like Australia, the Morrison government released a paper in 2019 and they established it was $26 billion a year lost productivity and costs related to premature death. So about a third of road accidents are due to micronapping, which is directly related to sleep apnea. A similar number in the workplace, and the list goes on. In a country like Australia, we have more than 10,000 premature deaths a year directly related to sleep apnea. And so some years ago, I did some work with a Mayo Clinic in the US and for the Australian government, and we got to that number of 10,000 and we just stopped counting. And yeah, that's how the science works out.
That's significant, and unfortunately for those dentists that aren't working in the sleep space, they're ignoring the fact that they can be and they should be helping their patients not just with the mechanical side of panel beating their teeth when they get a cavity, but they should be looking at the connection between what's going on in the mouth or what can be treated in the mouth and the ability to improve the life of their patient or the longevity of each patient just by asking them a simple question. And it's interesting, Owen, because I was discussing this with a Canadian sleep medicine dentist from Toronto, and he was telling me also that in the US and Canada, the incidence of sleep apnea in women is lower than men, but it increases to being equal to men when the women reach menopause, and so they then become equal. And because we were all, the other side effect of poor sleep in a household, Owen, is that it means people are sleeping, if they can, in separate bedrooms so that they don't hear the other person, and if they can't, it can mean a divorce, which is also very much financially life-shortening for some. So
unfortunate.
So again, it's the ability to help people remain in their regular household routine, and help them to have that comfortable sleep, or their partner. And so, as you said, conversations at dinner parties, and it's not, some people say, "Oh, I don't have any issues, but I can't sleep because he's snoring or she's snoring beside me."
Yes. And the devices like ours actually reduces snoring quite dramatically. And I think it's important to say it's not just really doing the right thing by the patient. I think there's a wonderful opportunity for the dental community to also do the right thing by themselves in terms of this is a very big, valuable marketplace. And so while certainly everyone involved in bioanalytics is doing this project for, I guess you'd call the greater good, the addressable market, the directly addressable market is over $3 billion per annum. And it's growing at 8% year on year. So it's a huge, valuable market. And in terms of the Bioanalytic device, which is targeting directly those people who have been diagnosed but are not using their device that was scripted, that's almost $1 billion per annum. It's $980 million per annum. So that's the direct addressable market. And I can understand in the past there'd be perhaps some complexity around scripting a device because traditionally a device would have to be custom built for a patient. One of the interesting things about the Bioanalytics device is that it's the world's first device that's mass produced and adjustable so that you don't have to have a bespoke device for a patient. It's adjustable and a dentist can adjust it to fit an individual patient, which is, I think, quite interesting in terms of making the pathway simpler. And then our device has a number of other attributes that also make it quite attractive, I think.
Yes, well, definitely, in the past, having to have a mouthful of impression material is not an attractive thought for a lot of patients, but now we have digital scanners to help replace those impressions. They are far more comfortable, but they do take time. So the seating of something that is customizable, like the Bioanalytics device, is really a great step forward for people who, again, are looking for a solution. As you said, it's a solution because they know they have a problem, but they know they can't accept the standard treatment of a CPAP or a custom fitted device. So making them aware that that's not the answer. But we're talking about the same sort of people who sometimes don't like to be seen wearing hearing aids, and the hearing aid helps them to hear the truck
That's right.
coming out as they're stepping out onto the road. But it is important that there is this market. Tell me about the advancements with the bioanalytics device. It's called the iSlr. Tell me how, like in the time that I've known you and John, you've now got data collection, electronic data collection available
Yes.
on the device as well.
Yeah, that's right. So the iSlr is a really interesting product, and it's considered to be quite disruptive because it sits at the intersection of a device that's both therapeutic, diagnostic, and wearable. And in addition to that, it's low cost. So this is a device that is far more affordable for the average person than a CPAP machine, perhaps 1/7, 1/10 of the cost of a CPAP machine and mask if the individual was paying for it themselves. And that was one of the things we set out to do, was to make a product that would be adjustable and easy to fit, that would be affordable. And we wanted something that would actually monitor the patient's sleep. And so we have electronics and software in the device, and it's the world's first device that has an external component as well as an internal component, which sounds a little bit odd, but the way the device works is that it fits into your mouth, and there's a pad that pushes against the mandible and pushes that forwards. But there's also an element that rests against your lip outside of the mouth, and that distributes the force in a far more comfortable way. And as you mentioned, David, we don't anchor against the teeth, the upper or lower teeth. We have a unique way of doing this, and that's patented. The device has 5 patents in total across the Western countries, so including the US and Europe and the UK, also places like China and India. So we've got 5. And one of those patents is what you mentioned, that we have an electronic component that sits on the lip in the device, and it monitors airflow. And so it's able to detect apnea events. And that does 2 things. One, allows the app that's connected to the device to let the user know that the device is either working correctly or they should adjust it to perhaps increase the titration. And the other thing it does is it measures compliance, which is particularly important more and more in the future, because often people are doing important roles and they have sleep apnea, and it's important that we know that they're using their therapies. So sleep apnea affects about 1 in 10 people, adults over the age of 18 in the Western world. So it's a very large number of people. It's 67 million people in the Western world. And some of those people drive buses or fly airplanes or operate heavy equipment. And it's important that they're using their therapy for their own safety, but also the safety of others. Our device allows a clinician to be able to work with their patient to say, yes, you're getting good compliance, and also the device is working as intended. There's one other dimension, and that is the diagnostic side, which dentists could fit a device and not actually have it titrated, so not putting any pressure on the mandible. and the device will monitor the patient's sleep, and if warned for a couple of weeks, return to their dentist, and the dentist will be able to look at the information on the app and say, well, you have sleep apnea, this is the severity, and then adjust the device accordingly. So the electronics has been quite a big breakthrough. We use very common components, and we've got a system which we sort of designed about 4 or 5 years ago, but strangely, Apple is doing almost the same thing in their latest Apple Watches, which also detect sleep apnea. Which I think is an interesting thing to mention for people listening to this, is that more and more people have wearables, have a smart watch. Maybe it's from Apple or Google or Samsung. They all now monitor sleep apnea, and they will tell the user over a period of 2 to 4 weeks if they're at risk of having sleep apnea. And I think the dental community is really perfectly placed to work in this space, both in terms of doing good, but also there's an opportunity for new revenue streams.
Well, certainly I know from my conversations with that dentist in Toronto that it also has been for him, the chance to segue out of clinical dentistry and drill and fill dentistry, and he runs a practice now totally based on treating patients with sleep conditions and the sleep medicine side, as well as educating dentists to be able to do the same. And that has excited him in that he now can go to work and be doing good for the community, but it also allows him to work on without burning his body out, because the practice of dentistry is quite taxing on the mind and physically. Sitting still, people say, how can sitting still be taxing? But it is. Having to hold things in certain positions and lean in certain ways, very taxing on the body. So it's exciting there for the dental profession to be able to have this avenue that they thought maybe was not around or didn't exist. So it's a very good part of improving dental practice.
Yeah, that's right. And depending on the country you're in, there are reimbursement codes around both the diagnostic side of sleep apnea as well as the therapeutic side. So country dependent, therapies are funded by the government, but importantly, we have a device that's quite affordable. And so for those countries or people who fall outside of that net, this is an opportunity that clinicians, dentists can work with in a way that patients can afford. And I think that's something that, was important for us as well. The interesting thing about sleep apnea is that only 30% of people suffering a sleep apnea rate that needs to be treated, and we consider that around 15 events per hour or more, and only 30% are diagnosed. So most people have sleep apnea, 70% are not diagnosed, or they may know that there's potentially an issue, but they haven't done anything about it. And again, if you have dinner with some friends, someone around the table will probably point to their partner and say, he has sleep apnea, or she stops breathing. I watch her, she stops breathing, and, she needs to do something about it, or he needs to do something about it. And it's often your bed partner who will pull you up. And as you mentioned, David, snoring, which is not directly correlated with sleep apnea, but is an indicator, is also quite disruptive for your bed partner. And fortunately, our device is quite effective in reducing snoring.
Well, anything that increases the amount of air or the size of the airway will reduce, snoring is a vibration of a restricted airway, either the nasal cavity or the throat. So this is a very exciting device there. Oh, and you mentioned that you've already got regulatory approval, not only in Australia, in New Zealand and in the United Kingdom as well.
That's right, and through Europe. So we've got regulatory approval for the Western world, apart from the US, but we have been working with the FDA, and they've been very helpful, and they love what we do. We have a clinical trial design that's been assessed by the FDA, and the terminology is that we have no further comments, which means we approve of the trial design. We haven't undertaken that trial yet, but we do have regulatory approval, as you mentioned, David, for all of Europe, the UK, Australia, New Zealand.
Well, that's exciting, because this is therefore something that is real. It's not just hocus pocus. And
That's right.
because regulatory approval, it's not just filling in a form and getting a stamp. There's a number of hoops and tests and clinical trials that you have to go through. So congratulations on that. You did mention that you've got FDA approval in the United States for an approved clinical trial as well.
That's right.
Which is an expensive step. And so,
yes.
That's something that if you've gotten that far, getting the trial going is really just a matter of getting the funding to make sure the trial works. And so I think that's, we were talking beforehand, that's where Bioanalytics is at the moment. It's a company that's ready to go to market or nearly ready to go to market, but just needs a little bit more capital investment to start off with. And then you plan to not actually continue spreading it through market, but to on-sell it to somebody who can do the job better. Is that the way we're
That's
looking at
right.
it?
Yeah, so we see ourselves as a research and development organization, and our mission is to put this device in the hands of as many users as we can. That's our goal. And when we assessed the best way to do that, we fairly quickly came to the conclusion that what we need to do is to develop the product to a point where it's got independent clinical trial evidence that it's working well. We wanted to have a family of patents. We wanted some regulatory approval, and we wanted strong internal trials, but then we wanted to put it in the hands of one of the really big healthcare companies or the big sleep apnea companies, or maybe one of the big technology companies. So the device has been shown to some of the biggest tech companies in the world, and they've got quite interested because they say, well, that's the future. We're building an ecosystem for monitoring and treating patients, companies like Apple, for example, and, your device fits squarely into that ecosystem. That's what we're really looking to do. So we've been working with Grant Thornton, which is the world's fifth biggest accountancy and M&A organization in the world, after the likes of PricewaterhouseCoopers and Deloitte, and have an agreement and a plan to how to market our product to one of the big healthcare or technology companies in a global sales process. And to get there, we're going to have some independent clinical evidence. So we have internal trials that have gone very well. In our internal trials, we see a 70% reduction in sleep apnea for our users. And we've got long-term users who have been using our device for several years. And we've not only got the data from the user themselves, but also from their bed partners who say things like, thank goodness he's using that device because I can sleep now. It's quite surprising what you find in the research. And so that's terrific that we've been able to do that. And so really we're raising a relatively small amount of money to complete around about a 30 patient clinical trial led by, an eminent researcher. We've been lucky enough to work with some of the best researchers in Australia, but also globally recognized. And that's what we're gearing up to do.
Excellent. So I like the work that you've done so far. And, this is, Bioanalytics has seen a need in a couple of ways. First of all, for people without teeth to have an appliance that can help them with their sleep-related condition. And secondly, it fits into that part of the market where people have tried the CPAP machine. I know my dad wears one and he lives on his own. Sometimes the noise of the machine keeps people awake as well. And he actually says that, and you'd be aware of this, he said if the mask accidentally slips on him, the whistle of the air coming in through the gap in the mask wakes him up.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, CPAP works really well for a group of patients, and it's not that we're trying to replace CPAP or other mandibular devices. It's just that clinicians really need more tools, and this is a tool that works really well with about 2/3 of the market for people with an apnea rate of up to around 40 events per hour. And it really the development's really been driven by the belief that, and I think this sort of hopefully resonates with the dental community who might be listening to this, is that, as physicians, we look to care for the whole of the patient, not just their teeth. And this is something that I think will allow more people to be more active in treating sleep apnea, which is, really a very important thing. And I guess as a byproduct, we seem to be developing something that is quite valuable. And for those investors that potentially choose to be involved with this, they may benefit through the sales process. And we're looking to raise around about $600,000 or a little bit more Australian just to finish off our project. A little bit of a victim of the COVID period where you weren't allowed to do any research in the respiratory space. Although I can share with you that the public health care system in New South Wales, that the public hospitals were reaching out to me to ask, could we supply our device, because CPAP is a problem for COVID. As you mentioned, the mask slips off and things spray around, including COVID. So that was an issue. One of the things that perhaps is also interesting just to briefly mention is that even for those people who are comfortable using CPAP, we've had a lot of people tell us they'd love to have a companion device that they could use while they're traveling. So, if you're in first class in an aeroplane, it's good. You can put your CPAP machine on and nobody will see. But if you're in economy, it's difficult. It's difficult to get your device through, security, but it's also difficult to set it up. And it's also kind of big and bulky to be carrying around while you're traveling. And there's been a lot of strong interest from CPAP users to say, oh, and I'd love to have one of those. Look, at home, probably keep using my CPAP device, but I want one of these to travel with. And some of that's psychological. They might be sharing a room with someone else and they don't want them seeing them tangled up in their mask and tubes. But we know that psychology is part of why people stop using therapies as well as comfort. And there's sometimes a practical dimension to it as well. And so we're quite excited about all of those sort of components. We feel we've developed a product that is quite unique in that it's comfortable for those people who can't use existing therapies. It's affordable. It's the world's first adjustable device. So it's something that dentists could actually have on the shelf and fit. It's the world's first device that has an internal and external component, and that allows us to use electronics and monitor breathing and have an app. And as I mentioned, it tackles a market that's valued at about $1 billion per annum that's identified. So we know it's there. We know the people who have sleep apnea, but they're not using any therapy. And it fits at that crossroad between the wearable, the devices we're using now to monitor our health, and the therapeutic, a device that will actually is clinically proven to treat a disease state. And it also sits in that diagnostic space, so it helps somebody actually determine if you have sleep apnea, although traditional sleep studies are probably a good idea. It's just nice to know that this one can also do that.
I think, and it's probably a good way to tidy up here. I know in Canada that any dentist who identifies a patient has a sleep issue has to organise a sleep study done by a sleep physician. And
Yes.
Often the dentist loses the patient because the sleep physician will say, here, have a CPAP machine.
Right.
It's not the most appropriate form of treatment. And so often the dentists don't want to lose their patient for that. And so they ignore the fact that the patient is reporting on these signs. And the issue in Australia, I think when I started was, well, you should have your patients have a sleep study just so that you know that they aren't severe sleep apnea and that you can treat them as a dentist if it's mild or moderate. And that still scares dentists. Where's the line? 49%, 51%. It's golden point sort of stuff. And so to be able to take that out of the equation in terms that we're offering them something that, as you said, it's therapeutic, diagnostic, wearable, and low cost. So it's not a big expense, and they can get an improvement. They can see an improvement straight away. And I love the fact that you can actually put it in the neutral state and then measure, because of the diagnostic electronics on it, measure it straight away and say, right, this is confirming. Because that's the other thing about a sleep study. A colleague of mine and myself both had them in hospital and said that they were the worst night's sleep we had in our lives. Sleeping on a bed that had no padding, covered in a blanket or a sheet that was about as big as a handkerchief. It was freezing. How could you get a good night's sleep in that sort of conditions? It was like being in prison and then wired up.
That's right. Yes.
It's difficult. This gives a lot. This is a big. You've identified a good spot in the market to be
Yeah.
able to help the community.
I think that's right. And, our goal is really to maintain the relationship between the patient and their dentist, because I think that's really important. And one of the risks is that someone has scripted a device but then doesn't use it. If you're monitoring somebody's sleep quality ongoing because there's an app and there's electronics in the device, you have the ability to have that closer relationship and deliver that expert advice to ensure the well-being of the patient. So that's certainly something that we're really aiming for. And there's sort of a bigger picture around the data and acknowledging privacy and the rights of a patient. But big healthcare is very, very interested in the collection of data, particularly because we have all of these different disease states that are linked with sleep apnea. And so there's quite a high level of interest around the opportunity to have data collection from so many users. Now, it would be clearly a question of privacy and for individual users to not be identified, but to have this population group contribute in that way, could lead to, research and, potential breakthroughs around the associated disease states, not just sleep apnea. And I think that's sort of the world we're heading a little bit more towards. So that's also quite exciting, although that's sort of a nice to have. It's not something we've sort of really focused on.
No, but it is, and it is for the common good. Oh, and if anybody watching or listening to this podcast wants to find out more about bioanalytics and the iSlr or get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so I think the best way is to perhaps send me an email to bioanalytics.com.au. Or David, we might even be able to share in the future some links to our capital raise, and there'll be a whole suite of information available. And we would love to hear from anyone who has an interest, of course.
Of course. Well, you just jumped to my second question. If anybody wanted to be involved in the capital raise or an investor, or
Yes.
They should just also get in contact with you via email. Is that the best?
I think so, yes. And I can point them to the right place. We'd love that support.
Well, Owen, I like this because it is, as we've said repeatedly through this recording, the CPAP is the gold standard, but it doesn't work for everybody. And therefore, those people who it doesn't work for are left stranded because there's no second or third option. And there's little follow-up from the physicians on that. So this now gives those people who can't tolerate a CPAP machine or can't tolerate a large device in their dental device in their mouth from ResMed or someone like that, this gives them a really good chance of at least continuing on with some form of therapy that's going to help them with their sleep, help them with their associated medical conditions, and help them with their quality of life and hopefully extend their life as well. So kudos to you and Bioanalytics for what you're bringing to the table.
Well, thank you. And that was the perfect summary, David. And it's very, very generous that you invited me onto your show. So I really appreciate that.
No, always a pleasure. Dentists have a hard time. Nobody ever wakes up on a Monday morning, looks in their wallet, sees $500 and says, I'm going down the dentist to see what I can buy. It's a pretty tough sort of market to be working in. Everybody hates you and they would rather not be there. So this is now a chance for dentists to actually work for good rather than be seen as, the torture chamber of what they used to be known as back in the 1960s.
And I think that's a great point. And our goal is really to help bring a closer relationship between the dentist and their patients through the device that we've created in the data collection.
Yeah, no, it's excellent. Thanks again for being a guest. It's been great talking to you, and I'm sure that my viewers and listeners will be quite surprised at this side of dentistry and how we can help our patients to live better lives and be healthier.
It's been my pleasure to be here. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Owen.
Thank you for tuning in to another inspiring episode of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. We appreciate each and every one of you for being part of our dental community and joining us each week on this incredible journey. If you found value in today's episode and you don't want to miss out on future episodes packed with expert insights and actionable strategies, here's how you can stay connected with us. Firstly, hit that subscribe button. Whether you're listening on your favourite podcast platform or watching on our website, subscribing ensures you'll never miss an episode. Secondly, share the love. If you know a fellow dentist or colleague who could benefit from the wisdom and knowledge that we share here, please share our podcast with them. Also, please share the podcast on your socials by simply clicking on the social icons wherever you view or listen to this podcast. Together, we can all do our bit to elevate the dental profession. And finally, stay engaged with us. We love hearing from you. Your questions, comments, and feedback fuel our mission to provide the best content for your professional growth, your personal growth, and for your practice growth. Remember, your journey to creating a dental practice and a business life that you love is our mission, and we're excited to be your trusted guide along the way. Thank you for being a part of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. Until next time, keep smiling, keep striving, and keep on tuning in to the Ultimate Dental Podcast.